welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, Blake Lovell, who does such tremendous work over at Southeastern 16. We're going to chat it up with him about the fact that Marcus Spears Jr., the number 1 recruit for the class of 2027, well, he is now there in 2026 for Texas, what that all means for the Longhorns, and then we're additionally going to be chatting with him about the fact that earlier in the week, we saw the lawsuit come through with all 15 of those folks from the great state of Ohio that were able to get eligibility. What does that mean moving forward? And might LSU be in on some of these guys? So that's going to be a lot of good, clean family fun. And then here in segment number 1, we're going to recap what we all saw here in college basketball on Friday. Mike Boynton, he has now had the interim tag removed, but has he really? We're going to be chatting about that. And I will give you a little bit more reaction to Spears Jr., who decided to reclassify to the class of 2026. And if you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, RCM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I do beg with you, I do plead with you, please do send in these Twitter/X questions. It helps make the off season go by a little bit faster, and it allows me to know what you all want to hear on this podcast as well. But let's start things off. Mike Boynton, he's had the interim tag removed, and he is going to be the Michigan coach going forward. Now, it's a 2-year deal, so it sounds like it's going to be for a long time, but I mean, it's an interim plus, I would like to say. Like, this is exactly what St. Joe's did last year. You may recall Steve Donahue, he gets a job at the last second, and it's sort of a very similar situation. He was coaching over at Penn let him go, and then he takes a assistant job over at St. Joe's. They had their coach leave just before the start of the season. This happened more in September/October, and they decide, we need some stability. We're going to give you a 2-year deal to sort of prove it, and that's what exactly is going to be happening with Mike Boynton. And for Mike Boynton, this is going to be a second go-around, and I think 2 things can be true with Mike Boynton. It's certainly a better situation than Michigan had than compared to most schools, because most schools, you don't have a guy that has a bunch of head coaching experience at the power conference level. You're either getting an assistant or you're getting a guy that maybe was coaching at insert your favorite mid-major here. Mike Boynton has that. I argue that Mike Boynton underachieved a little bit at Oklahoma State. The one time they made the NCAA tournament, they had Cade Cunningham and they couldn't even make it to the Sweet 16. If I remember correct, that was that Oregon State team. That knocked him off there. But at the same time, too, I feel like Mike Boynton also didn't necessarily have the most fair of shakes over there at Oklahoma State. You may recall, that's back when sanctions and self-reporting was a thing in college basketball. I don't know what's happened in this day and age, but that was something that definitely happened over at Oklahoma State. They don't have the resources, the NIL, what have you, that Michigan does. And as of right now, we have not seen any of these Michigan players really enter in the transfer portal. They still do have a little bit of time if they decide that they want to leave, but it doesn't appear that that's going to be the case. And with the court rulings that we saw earlier in the week, there's going to be much, much more competition if these Michigan players want to enter in the transfer portal. So it appears as though you're going to have these guys like Mustafa Cham, you're going to be having the JP Estrellas, Elliot Caduce, and company on this roster. And I do think that with Michigan, it's what I've been saying on my podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, for the last few weeks, and we're going to say it once again here, the fact that I think that if you had them number 1 in your power rankings in the Big Ten going in prior to the news of Dusty May, you maybe lower them a peg, but I certainly think that there's a Big 3 out there in the Big Ten. It's Michigan, it's Michigan State, and it's Illinois. Now, could a team be able to emerge from the abyss? Absolutely. We see it every year in college basketball. Heck, a lot of people at Purdue number 1 in the Big Ten going into last season, and Michigan very, very easily overtook them. But I do think that for Michigan, it gives them a little bit of stability. They've got some known coaching, and I think that this is a smart move. They're not married or tied to him entirely, but at the same time, it gives a little bit more stability than just an interim coaching tag. And then when it comes to Mr. Spears reclassifying for the class of 2026 for Texas, this is a pretty big deal for them, because for Spears, he's a guy that is going to probably have a little bit of a tough time being able to acclimate to the college game, and we've seen some mixed results. Like, I think that it was Gigi Johnson. Hopefully I got the last name correct. He was over at South Carolina a few seasons ago. He was that top prospect, and he really didn't have a lot of success. But I do think that for Marcus Spears Jr., he is helped out by the fact that Texas is actually a really loaded roster. Like, I really believe that even without him, they could easily be a top 3, top 4 team in the SEC, and we'll definitely be talking about this a little bit more with our good friend Blake Lovell of Southeastern 16 in a few minutes. But Matetas Vokatitis being back in the fold for them, that was obviously massive. You've got a pretty loaded backcourt for them. This is a front court that is going to be one of the better ones in all of college basketball. And he's 6'9". He's a little bit more of a, you probably want him as a wing, I would say, because he's still a little bit undersized. He's listed as like less than 200 pounds, so they might be bullied, especially when you go up against a front court like Florida, what have you. But I think that this is a really good ad for a Texas team that they're now a very complete team. There's not a lot of depth issues with this team or anything like that. I definitely do think that they're going to be towards the top of the SEC. I'm still very curious to see what's going to be happening with Tennessee because they are very much going in on Rick Barnes, what have you. But this is a very big move for Texas, and I think that we can't be sleeping on a team that went to the Sweet 16 last year. They were very close to making it to the Elite 8, and that was in what was a anti-air quotes here down year for Texas. So I really think that Sean Miller has things rocking and rolling. This is a great move for them. So I'm very curious to see what's going to be just ahead of Marcus Spears Jr. But regardless, this is a very nice ad for Texas, and it's always a great ad whenever we get Blake Lovell on this show. He does such great work over at Southeastern 16. We'll talk a little bit more about Texas. We'll certainly talk about LSU and the fact that Jan Madar is ineligible, but hey, LSU might be able to sign some other guys, and we'll talk a little bit more about Kentucky and so much more right here on Good Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Guts Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast, and it is always great to be joined by this man as we've got Blake Lovell aboard. He does such great work taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. I know that he's dialed in on the finger of the pulse of everything that we're seeing out there in the Southeast over at Southeastern 16, but additionally, he's doing just an incredible job looking at this entire game of college basketball. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell. Last name is spelled Lovell altogether. And Blake, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks always for having me, Greg.
Thank you for joining me, Blake. And Blake, I think that it's clear that Florida is going to be that top team in the preseason going into things. But that said, we saw some big news for Texas. Texas, they get the number one prospect from the 2027 class in Marcus Spears Jr. And I remember Marcus Spears. And now he reclassifies to 2026. How do you take a look at this Texas team now? One that we both have talked about that we like on this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we did our way too early, kind of summer SEC basketball power rankings earlier this week. And there were some people that were surprised that we had Texas at 2. And we said, I don't know why you really should be, because if you look at the overall makeup of this roster, I think on paper, they're the second best team. And then 48 hours later, they got, Marcus Spears. And so you're just thinking, okay, I don't think there's much debate now. That to me, they didn't kind of stay where they were. They moved closer towards the Florida conversation of being a team that feels like maybe it's disappointing if they don't make the Final Four. Now, that's easier said than done. And so I think right now, again, I had him there before the Spears edition, and I think now would kind of solidify that even more because I think it certainly gives them plenty of more depth and playmaking ability that they're going to have. But I think when you just look at the overall makeup of their roster, the thing I've kind of pointed out with Texas is that I don't know that you're going to look at them and feel like there is anything that just is completely flashy that stands out. But I feel like at every single position, they are built to be successful. And I think, again, when it comes to the guys that are going to be behind, what your kind of projected starting five is. But I think overall, they've got the playmaking, they've got the sort of inside out and the versatility offensively. They can beat you in 3 or 4 different ways in terms of how they run their offense with these guys on this roster. Vokatitis and David Punch, they're going to form one of the better, I think, 1-2 duos in the front court. And so with this addition now of a player like Spears, again, I think it only adds to the argument that right now, at least to me, they're the second best team in the SEC. And let's be honest, if Florida didn't kind of have the makeup of a roster you just don't see very often, Texas probably would be the top team in the SEC heading into the year.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I really like what I'm seeing out of Texas right now. And just what can we expect out of Spears himself? Because he is the number one prospect for the class of 2027. A lot of times when these guys reclassify, it feels like it's a little bit of a mixed bag. And that's the one question that I do have with regards to Texas right now.
Yeah, and I think that is a fair question just because, you're talking about a guy who certainly, he has size. And I think when you look at what's in front of him, like I said, when you're looking at a lineup that probably at this point is going to feature a 6'7" David Punch, a 6'8" Elijah Freeman, and a 7-foot Matas Vokatitis. I mean, there's not a lot of room to go around necessarily when you just consider probably the expectations for those guys in particular. The backcourt depth kind of speaks for itself when you look at that group of, Isaiah Johnson, Mikey Lewis, Austin Gooseby, Amari Evans. And that's why, again, you can kind of point towards Texas feeling like they're the complete package. But I think with Spears, it is going to be one where, you do kind of see exactly how it's going to play out. And I think that's one because of, again, what's in front of them. And like you said, it's a reclassification for someone. Can you adjust to that physicality, especially in the SEC? I mean, I mentioned Florida, right? I mean, you're going to see a team like that, and that's going to be miles different than anything else you've ever seen. And so I think from that perspective, it's kind of one of those where I'm curious to see how it plays out.
Yep, I am as well. As Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I believe that there were a few former SEC players that were involved in the lawsuit in Ohio to where we now have a bunch of eligibility for a lot of people. There were 15 plaintiffs there. Now, I know that for Cincinnati, they're going to be getting MJ Collins right away. He was over at Utah State, averaged 17.5 points per game. There were a few other guys. Jalen Washington, I know, is a part of one of those lawsuits as well. And just how do you take a look at what we're going to be getting the next few weeks? Because we could legitimately see a second wave in the transfer portal now that all these guys magically have eligibility again.
Yeah, it's like when you have to come up with the guessing game on this thing, it's just impossible, isn't it? Like, how do you even figure out exactly how this whole thing's going to go? And like you said, I mean, I don't think there's any question that now you're going to have, some guys that are out there and there are going to be teams that are saying, you know what? We felt like maybe we did a little bit of a swing and miss in this position or that position. And now we look at a different pool of players to choose from. Because now we know, whereas you have some of these other guys, the international guys, we've talked about LSU quite a bit and all that, those questions linger a bit more. But with this, there is no question anymore about who is and who isn't eligible in terms of this framework that they have, with the 5-for-5 rule. And so, yeah, it's going to be interesting, Greg. I mean, because like we said, it's sort of one of those where, teams are not going to shy away from this. Teams have already went out and gotten players having no idea if they were going to be eligible. So now that you have more clarity, like it's going to be, I guess pun intended, full court press here when it comes to guys trying to fill some of these spots on these teams that are just, trying to find that missing piece that maybe they didn't think they would be able to get this offseason. Yeah,
and for a lot of teams, there is one missing piece, sometimes two, and that brings us to LSU, my friend, who Yam made our shock, surprise. A man who was drafted in 2020 into the NBA did not get eligibility. And if he would have, boy, things would be rough there. But how do we take a look at an LSU team that, I mean, if RJ Lewis gets eligibility, we need to be questioning everything about the NCAA right now. But they're very much a team that has money. They are very much looking. A lot of players just got eligibility. And I think that LSU is probably going to be trying to get the best of the best when it comes to that crop right now.
Yeah, and I wouldn't bet against it. Like I think that's the thing is like you said. I mean, they have what a lot of teams don't have at this very second, and that is remaining cash. And I think that is the big thing where you are going to look at again some of these guys who have this opportunity to now be back in the mix, and you're going to look at LSU, and again, we still have questions about other guys, but we know with Madar, I mean, he's out of the picture. Okay, how do we address that? And yes, there are still some questions with some of the other guys on the roster, but I don't really still, and this is why, again, I mentioned earlier, we did our way too early power rankings. I said, as wild as it sounds, I don't think I could rank LSU like in the bottom 4 of the SEC right now, even without a very incomplete roster, because I have that confidence that they're going to find a way to make this work. And I even went as far as to say, look, the range here for LSU is that right now you could put them 12th in the SEC based on worst case scenario. You could also put them second in the SEC on best case scenario if they start to get a lot of positive things that happen with some of these guys in terms of knowing they're going to play, because that's the talent that they're working with. And now there are going to be some other names that join the mix there. So still, again, the most unpredictable team out there, just because you don't really know what you're getting. You couldn't name a starting lineup right now. But if all goes maybe according to their plan, I still am of the belief that this could wind up being a team that is kind of one that sort of disrupts the party there at the top of the SEC.
Oh man, this is going to be so interesting to take a look at what is going to be happening with LSU, to say the least. There's still so much question mark with that team, and I would say that they're the most unpredictable team in all of college basketball right now, just because we don't know what the roster is quite yet. As Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and the good news is we have a little bit more known entities when it comes to the rest of the SEC. And how do you take a look at the rest of this conference? Because you mentioned that you had Texas number 2 in your SEC power rankings, and I believe Bart Torvik does as well. I just still look at Tennessee as one of the most intriguing teams in all of college basketball, though, because they're clearly all in to try to get Rick Barnes a title. They're going to be changing around their style a little bit, bringing in these guys like Jalen Harrelson, Juke Harris, what have you. I think that they're one of these teams of intrigue, because for Tennessee, for the longest time, it was always all about defense, and now they are going pedal to the metal with this offense.
Yeah, I think, and I think we wound up putting Tennessee at, I think it may have been 5. I think I had them individually at 4 in my SEC rankings, and I had Arkansas ahead of them because I think, again, that's another team that certainly has some questions in the front court, but I don't know that there's anyone that's going to kind of parallel their depth on the perimeter. And I think Tennessee and Kentucky were the 2 teams I had the hardest time with, because I think with Tennessee, you nailed it. It is, you're betting on Rick Barnes, which is a good idea. And I know people will pick on the postseason thing, but that's kind of out the window now. They went to 3 straight, Elite at Sweet 16, like they've been there now for the last 4 years. And so, yes, maybe they haven't breaking through to the Final Four, but only 4 teams do every year. And so I think overall you figure that he will figure it out. But it is a team that looks so different than any other team he's had there, and maybe any other team he's had in a long time in his coaching career. It's just hard for me to go all in right now until I see how, things are going to look defensively. But I just think still, even without kind of the giants in the front court, like this is going to be a little bit of a smaller team than Tennessee fans are used to. But you've got to think they're going to figure it out offensively and be able to put up enough points to where, surprise, surprise, are we really going to be talking about Tennessee playing games that are shootouts versus, some of these games we're used to seeing Tennessee in the past that were not so much. And then with Kentucky, it's somewhat similar in that I trust the foundation of the roster, but I think it's fair to question Mark Pope still at this point and see if they can put it all together, because, the last couple of years, they've been very inconsistent. I'm willing to give him kind of a break that first year, because remember, that came in a historic SEC season with as good as the league was that year. But last year, Greg, I mean, it's almost like, let's not act like there weren't high expectations coming into the season with people thinking this could be a top 10 to 15 team. And it just didn't happen. And I know injuries have played a role too, so you can kind of give them a little bit of a break there. There's only so much you can do. But I think Tennessee and Kentucky, 2 teams that we're used to talking about at the top, I think there is a lot of, potential for this range to be a little bit larger for these 2 teams this year, because there are some differences in terms of the way the rosters are built. And in some cases, there are some fair arguments to wonder if the coaches can put it all together, either with different rosters in Rick Barnes' case, more offensive minded, or with Mark Pope just living up to the pressure of trying to get Kentucky back to the top.
Yep, and with Kentucky, another one of those teams that it feels like they might be in business for one or two of these guys that got eligibility too. So that'll be interesting to look at. And Blake, I always love asking this question. I feel like we might get a little bit of a different answer this time. Over the last few weeks, because there's a lot that's actually happened over the last few weeks, who's the team that you're looking at that you're now feeling a little bit differently on, other than Michigan? Because, well, Michigan, you lose Sussie May. That's one thing. But other than Michigan, is there one or two teams that you're stock up, stock down on, and just feeling a little bit different about?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because we did this week also try to put together our All-American teams way too early, trying to figure out exactly where to place some of these teams. The team I've become probably enamored with the most, maybe during that process, is St. John's, Greg. And I know you've talked about, the Donnie Freeman news and all that. But the reason why we spent a lot of time, I know you think, well, it's an SEC channel, and why are you guys talking about St. John's? We did quite a bit this week because we're again trying to fill out this All-American team. When you look at Yesufu and feeling like the possible role he's going to play for this team this year now, I mean, his numbers were ridiculous last year at Baylor. I think they could be even more ridiculous this year at St. John's, especially with the subtraction of Freeman due to the injury. And so that's one of those teams. And of course, the Big East, we've talked about the past couple of years. It's a conference where you kind of have your knowns in terms of what you are going to get, from your UConn and St. John's. And, there are some other teams that are certainly going to be able to make noise. Providence has high expectations now with Brian Hodgson there, and you just keep looking around and kind of waiting for Xavier, same situation. So I think when you look at teams like that, adding Villanova to the mix, I think St. John's is very fascinating to me with this injury, just because you kind of see what the upside can be with Yesufu. I mean, he can be one of the best players in the country. We put him on our first team All-American team. So 1 through 5, we said he's probably a guy from a pure production standpoint that's going to be there. I'm curious to see how everything else plays out for Rick Pitino, because I do think the Big East is way more intriguing this year, just in terms of kind of looking at the makeups of these rosters. Of course, again, you've had some coaching changes. What does Alan Huss do with Creighton? Like, these are all, I think, fascinating things when it comes to what they're going to be able to do this season. But I think St. John's is right there at the top in terms of intrigue, because A, it's Rick Pitino, but B, I think just from a roster standpoint, I'm really interested to see how it plays out.
Yep, it is going to be really interesting. And Blake, we've got ourselves a lot of fun here in college basketball, because we might be seeing a lot of moves happening over the next few weeks. You've got your finger on the pulse of it all, so let the good people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, I always appreciate it, Greg. Yeah, you can check out all of our SEC stuff over at Southeastern 16. Like I said, we even sprinkle in a little college basketball stuff every Thursday right now in the off season, so you can check out more thoughts there. And yeah, everything else college basketball. You can follow me on Twitter /X at the Blake Lovell.
And Blake does such an incredible job looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. And every single time he joins me, he lends such great insight. So a big thanks to Blake for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter /X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters the name does not matter. So, per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast, give you picks and analysis on every game, every day. Once we get in season, here in the off season, we're looking at all the news and notes of college basketball. Expect that Ivy League Conference preview podcast to be up within the next few days. That's something that I'm very much working on, and I'll be with you guys every single day, as this is a podcast that's went over 2,400 straight days without a missed podcast. So I appreciate you tuning in today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.